Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a baseball coach, a baseball fan, a season ticket holder. So I'm always interested in watching baseball, talking about baseball. And today I am in the Sky Dome Hotel talking about the Blue Jays. And joining me to talk about the Jays is Tom Dakers, the managing editor for Bluebird Banter. Just seemed fitting to have somebody from Bluebird Banter on Box Seat Banter here today. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks. We don't call it Skydome anymore, I'm afraid. We should call it Skydome still, but we don't.
That's true, and yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment. But yeah, excited to talk about the Jays with you today. They've been around since 1977 when they were founded as an expansion team in the American League. They've been in the AL East their whole existence.
Yep.
And the name, the Blue Jays, it came about from a naming contest. People submitted names. There were over 4,000 submissions, and blue was a constant theme in the submissions. They were owned by the Labatt Brewing Company, and Labatt Blue was, it's top beer. Yeah, so blue was in a lot of the names that were submitted. Blue Jays appeared 154 times, and Blue Jays was the winning submission. So yeah, they have been the Blue Jays ever since. Do you approve of that name? Would you have had a different submission back then?
I probably would have back then because I was pretty young. It would have probably been. I can't even remember what I liked back then, but yeah, no, it's worked out.
Yeah,
I don't know how come they decided that, but they were almost the Toronto Giants because there was a deal to move the Giants to Toronto that came in like the year before. And there was a last minute something that happened and it didn't happen. But we could have been in the National League and been the Giants had we had things worked out the way that were planned.
Oh, that was the Giants were going to move from San Francisco back to Toronto at that point?
Yeah, to Toronto. Yeah. There was apparently ownership troubles and attendance troubles and there was a deal in place. There's you can even buy a Toronto Giants cap. Their logo was kind of ugly, but a friend of mine has a Toronto Giants cap now.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I knew that the Giants, when they moved to San Francisco, they were about to move to Minnesota instead, but then the O'Malley convinced them to move to San Francisco when he was moving the Dodgers to LA. And then I also know in the early 90s they almost moved to Florida. But yeah, I didn't know about that tidbit there, almost moving to Toronto. Interesting.
Yeah, you can buy a cap. I haven't yet, but it'd be hard to explain. I don't like wearing caps where you have a 10-minute conversation with somebody trying to explain what this cap is, but a friend of mine from the site has one, so
nice. Well, they are the Blue Jays. They are that expansion team instead of the Giants. And like we just mentioned, they were originally owned by the Labatt Brewing Company.
Yep.
And they have played in the Rogers Center. So it's not the Sky Dome anymore. Like you said, it's the Rogers Center since 1989. However, last year in 2020, they had to play at their AAA home of the Buffalo Bison, Salem Field. So I know it's the Rogers Center. Do you call it the Rogers Center? Or do you call it the Sky Dome?
I call it Rogers Center. I probably, Skydome was a better name probably, but you have to keep up with trademarks and all that. Rogers owns everything in this country.
Yeah, that's true, including the team. So what's how is the Rogers Center as a ballpark? I mean, it's one of the I think it's one of the few true was it the first retractable roof stadium?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, and it was an amazing thing when it opened. I mean, it really was. It was, but unfortunately, it came in just before they kind of went to the old time ballparks again, like
Yeah.
in Baltimore, and it is dated now. It's the concessions aren't as good as they should be. The beer choices are terrible. You can get Budweiser and Canadian, and that's about it, unless you want to walk around a lot to look for something else. Um, when the dome is closed, it is not a great stadium. When the dome is open and you get fresh air, it's pretty good to watch a game. But when it's closed, it's stifling. It doesn't feel great.
How often are they able to have the dome open there for games?
They don't open it generally till early May, depending on the year, and then most games it'll be open. They'll
Okay.
just close for rain by then. Um, Generally early April, it's closed until they have a temperature. Apparently, it was not built to open when it's pretty cold, until it's like plus 12 or something. They don't like to try to open it because it'll, I don't know, shatter or explode or something. I have no idea, but they'll be closed for, you'll have a great spring day and you think, oh, it'd be wonderful to go to the park, and they still have it closed.
Mm-hmm. And in this time frame that we look at, the past quarter century, going back to '95, the Jays have won AL East title that came in 2015, and they were made the wild card in 2016, and then again this past year in 2020. No AL pennants in this time frame. They've got two total. Those were in '92 and '93, which obviously they don't have any World Series wins in this time frame either. And then they have those two total, '92 and '93. Of course, I mean '93, one of the great finishes to the World Series. That must have been pretty exciting.
It really was. I remember thinking, though, it was game 6 and
Mm-hmm.
game 7, Pat Henkin was going to start, and he had a really good season. And I really was kind of looking forward to game 7 with him. I thought, yeah, but Joe Carter pulled the ball, stayed fair. We've seen it like a million times, and the pitch was down and in, and how he kept it fair still amazes me. Um, I've talked to a few of the different players that were on the team asking about that moment, and Pat Henkin talks about he was charting the game, charting the pitches, and he said as the game went on, his writing was less and less legible because he was starting to, get into the game. Rickey Henderson was on second base. Rickey Henderson claims that he's the reason why Carter got a pitch he could hit, because Mitch Williams, who's my favorite reliever in the world, was throwing out of the stretch and was a little worried about Henderson stealing third. And apparently out of the stretch, he was a little bit slower. His pitches were a little bit slower, and Rickey Henderson claims credit for the home run, but Joe Carter showed us how high he could jump.
I don't know, many fans who, when you're up 3-2, would be looking forward to a game 7. I know I'm a Dodger fan, and this year, the Dodgers were up 3-2 to game 6, and they had potentially Walker Buehler throwing in game 7, who's shown to be a very good postseason pitcher. I was not hoping for game 7, so I think that's a pretty rare feeling that you had.
I,
Look.
I don't know that I was hoping, but I was kind of, I'm calm. It's good. We're going to win it. It might not be today. It might, but Carter, Carter won it, and it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Great moment there for the Blue Jays.
Carter actually, he was the last to touch the ball in 2 World Series because the year before he played first base, and the last out was Otis Nixon tried to bunt for a base hit, and he was thrown out at first, and Joe Carter was playing first base then. So he was the last to touch the ball in 2 World Series in a row.
Oh, nice. That's a pretty nice little tidbit right there. And in the Blue Jays history, they've only retired number 12 for Robbie Alomar and 32 for Roy Halladay, and then of course 42 retired for Jackie. Pretty stingy with the retired numbers there.
Yeah, I we also have, they call it the level of excellence,
Mm-hmm.
and a number of other guys are on that. Of course, now that I say it, I'm not sure who they are. I'm sure Halliday and Alomar and Carter and Tony Fernandez,
Mm-hmm.
whose number isn't retired, but I don't know that anybody wears it.
Yeah, it's kind of out of circulation.
Yeah.
Because is it only Hall of Famers whose numbers they retire?
Up till now, it seems to be. So, yeah, they're not too, they haven't given them out a lot.
Yeah, I do like it when teams are, have kind of a certain higher standards to retire numbers, but yeah, it does seem that the Blue Jays have been very stingy with that because they have some other great players, and like Dave Stieb was a great Blue Jay. So
he's on the level of excellence.
yeah, makes sense. So yeah, so there's anything else to add on those?
I every now and then somebody wears Jose Batista's number, and there's complaints, and it disappears. So.
All right, so there's a little bit of the introduction to the Toronto Blue Jays, and we'll get to a lot more coming right up. Last week on the show, we talked about the Baltimore Orioles. And so, Tom, the trivia question that I had on the Orioles was, what was the starting lineup the night that Ripken broke Lou Gehrig's consecutive games record? Do you have any guess on any of these players? I mean, one of them, you got to get one of them, right? At least one.
Well, yeah, Cal Ripken would
be
it. Was Eddie Murray still with the team?
He was, I think he may have, I don't know if he was on the team that year. And so that was one of the guesses that because let me see now, it was the Nick Cesare, who was my guest with the Orioles. He had, I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.5. He got 4.5 because he had one position incorrect. I was a little stricter on him because I went position. So he got 4.5. He actually, because Ripken was still playing short at that time. He thought he was moved over to third. So he got half a point on Ripken, but it's okay. Eddie Murray, he guessed Eddie Murray for DH, which was incorrect. Any other guesses you want to throw out there?
Did Chris Hoiles play for catcher?
He was the catcher, and you actually got that one correct. And Nick guessed Charles Johnson, which was incorrect. So yeah, you got Ripken, you got Hoiles. Any other guesses before I reveal the answers?
Davis wasn't at first base yet, was he? Oh no, that's too.
Yeah, no, it was Palmeiro was at first base.
Oh, right. Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, and Nick got that one correct. Brady Anderson in center. He was the leadoff batter.
Right.
which
Yeah, that huge year.
yeah, and Nick got that one correct. At second base, Nick
Not
was
Billy.
incorrect. Yeah, Nick. Yeah, that was what. Yeah, Nick guessed Robbie Alomar, which was incorrect. Manny Alexander was the second baseman. Palmero batted third. At first, in right field, Bobby Bonilla.
Oh,
Yeah,
still being played by the Mets, eh?
yep, for a while still coming. And that was a correct guess from Nick. Cal Ripken Jr. was at shortstop, not Mike Bordick, who Nick guessed. And Eddie Murray was his guess at DH, but it was Harold Baines who started at DH. Chris Hoyles at catcher. Jeff Hewson at third.
Catcher?
What? Yeah, Chris Hoyles at catcher.
That was my guess there.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Jeff Hewson at third. Mark Smith in left. And then the starting pitcher, Mike Mussina.
Okay.
Yeah, so that brings us to this week's trivia question about the Blue Jays.
Oh.
And so, Tom, there have been 3 Blue Jays players to hit for the cycle. Can you name the 3 Blue Jays players? And just a reminder, listeners, if you want to submit your guesses, if you think you know the answer, hit me up on social media at Box Seat Banter on both Twitter and Instagram. So Tom, do you know the answer? Do you want to throw the guesses out there?
I think I know the answer. Yeah. Jeff Fry.
Okay.
He was a second baseman for us for a year or two. Kelly Gruber played third. He was a surfer boy. He was from California. And Calvin Biggio.
Okay.
Would be my guesses.
Okay, and we will reveal the answer on the next episode. And is that the what all Canadians think about Californians, that Californians are just surfer boys?
Kelly had a interesting time here. He had one really great season, and he was hurt a lot. And some of the times he was hurt, people wondered if he was really hurt. He'd be on the DL, and yet people would know that he had been off doing some activity that, normally guys on the DL wouldn't do. There are rumors of recreational drug use and stuff like that. He didn't get as good a shake from Jays fans as he might have been, but he was blonde and good looking, and female members of the fans loved him. There were signs up, "Marry me, Kelly Gruber,"
Yeah, apparently not. The Canadians, because they're probably more used to the hockey players playing through, without teeth and broken bones and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Hockey has a different level of of what takes you out of the game, or at least it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different sport, though, because something that you would consider a tiny injury in baseball will affect how you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, so as we mentioned, the Labatt Brewing Company owned the team from its inception there, from 1976 to 95. And I think they kind of were attained by Interbrew. And so Interbrew then took over all of their properties. So Interbrew was the owner of the team from 95 to 2000. And then Rogers Communication has owned the team since 2000. As you mentioned, they are a big factor there in Canada. All corporate ownership there. How has that worked out for the Blue Jays?
Interbrew did not work out well. They didn't want to put any money into the team. They weren't Canadian. They were a European company, I believe.
Yeah.
Rogers hasn't been as bad. Fans, Cheap Rogers is probably a hashtag you'll see on Twitter quite a bit. They were massively better than Interbrew. Rogers owns, they probably own my coffee cup. They own everything in this country. They may be the richest owners in baseball. They have their name on half the buildings you see around. They're and most of the time they've been fine. They also own the sports channels that the team is on. Right now, we're really pissed at them because they won't show spring training games. Um, I don't know why, because the people that run their sports channels are not sports fans and they'd rather show us poker. But, they pay. I mean, we signed George Springer this year, and so hopefully things will be okay.
Yeah, it's a big market, and yeah, so they've been putting more money into the team. The GMs who have been in charge of signing those players, they had Gord Ash from 95 to 01. He sounds like he could have been a spokesman for some jeans. JP Riccardi from 02 to 09 was the GM. Yeah. Then Alex Anthopoulos from 2010 to 2015. And now their current GM is Ross Atkins. How have the GMs been doing?
Oh, Gordash was not loved. He wasn't my favorite. He came in at a bad time. Of course, we had won the World Series like 2 years in a row with an old team, a team that was aging. And of course, they aged quickly. And Gord, instead of, trying to rebuild, get younger, he would double down and sign old guys and finish last with old guys. And he never really had a plan, and the team was at the bottom of the division for most of his time. JP, totally not loved by the fan base. He came in saying he came from Oakland. He worked with Billy Beane. He came in saying, well, we can win with a much lower salary base. He let Carlos Delgado go away. He let a lot of the higher paid players go away and replaced them with lower paid guys, and they didn't win. And then one year he decided, we can't win. We can't beat the Yankees with a 1/3 of the payroll the Yankees have. So he signed BJ Ryan and Lyle Overbay and a few high-paid Burnett, and we didn't win with them either. So he and the fan base did not get along. Alex was a savior that got us into the playoffs, right? He started with let's build up the team from the minors and sustainable. And then a few years there, he went into go for it mode, and we signed high price free agents. And they won the 2 years in a row. Again, the team got old quickly. And of course, Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro came in. And Alex left. That did not buy Shapiro much goodwill from the fans, because you got rid of the guy that just got us into the playoffs. So Ross Atkins has had to rebuild trust. But
Hmm.
now he's put together a pretty good young core, and they're talking about a sustainable team for the next several years. We'll see if that happens.
Hmm. Okay, then the field managers, I've got some facts about them. See if you can identify the managers from the facts. So this first one in this time period that we're looking at was the first African American manager to win a World Series title.
Yeah, Cito.
Yes, he had a couple stints there managing the
Yeah.
Blue Jays from 89 to 97, and then again from 08 to 2010. Their next manager, this one was interesting. I never heard this one. Maybe you know what I'm going to bring up right here. He used to tell old Vietnam War stories to his players to motivate them, but they were completely made up. Now, he was a Marine Reserve during the war, but he never saw action.
Yeah.
He had also claimed that he was a high school basketball All American and turned down a scholarship to UCLA. He eventually confessed at the 98 winter meetings. And well, first of all, you can go ahead. Who is this manager?
Tim Johnson. Yeah.
Yes. So
Um,
just
we
yeah.
all fudge our resumes a little bit, right?
uh,
Normally, we don't say we went to war when we didn't, but everybody fudges a little.
yeah, so he was only there the 1 year in 98 because he confessed at the 98 winter meetings. He said it was a weight off his shoulders. He apologized to his players for lying to them.
Yeah,
But then he was eventually fired in March of 99 because he lost credibility. It was a distraction. I mean,
yeah,
and this was, I mean, the internet was around back then, but not what it is
yeah.
today. We didn't have social media. I mean, that would have been quite the scene had we had social media back then.
It still was quite the scene with reporters because they didn't let that go
Hmm.
on, and clearly they shouldn't have. I mean, there are things you can fudge. I mean, if he said he was an all-American basketball player and he wasn't, nobody would have cared.
Right.
But when you claim that shot people, you know, it doesn't go over well.
Yeah, understandably so. Their next manager was the first player to hit for the cycle at Dodger Stadium and the first player to hit for the cycle at Angel Stadium. He did so at Dodger Stadium in 1964 and at Angel Stadium in 1968.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we're up to oh God, what's his name? Fergozzi?
Yeah, Jim Fregosi.
Fergozzi,
Uh,
yeah.
he did so when he hit for the cycle at Dodger Stadium. He was playing for the Angels, but that was before Angel Stadium opened up. So the Angels played their home games at Dodger Stadium there for a few
Right.
years. Their next manager managed Team USA in the inaugural World Baseball Classic in '06.
Buck Martinez.
Yep. So he was manager from '01 to '02. And their next manager has an identical twin brother, Rick. And this manager also has no professional baseball playing experience. After college, he became a high school coach, then coach in the minors on his way to getting into the major league coaching.
Wow. He's slipped my mind.
Carlos Tosca.
Oh,
Is it
Carlos
Tosca?
Oscar, right, yeah. No
Yeah.
wonder he slipped my mind. He was very forgettable.
He was there for a few years, '02 to '04.
Right.
Then their next manager is last in career overturn percentage for managerial challenges with a minimum of 70 challenges. And
Yeah,
this goes back to 2014 when the replay system was introduced.
yeah. John Gibbons.
Hmm.
Being
So
fair to him, he would use up his challenge in like the 6th or 7th inning if he hadn't used it, because in the later innings, you could ask the umpires to look at a play,
Mm-hmm.
and almost always they did.
Yeah.
So he would use a challenge on a play, just
Yes.
even if he wasn't sure, just to get it over
Yeah. You
with.
got to shoot a shot, right? I mean, it's
Yeah. So yeah, he didn't, but it was kind of a strategy. So
uh-huh. Yeah, so he was a manager. He also had a couple stints there managing from '04 to '08, and then again from 2013 to 18.
yeah,
His stats there on the challenges, he got 85 overturned out of 225 attempts from 2014 to 2018, good for 37.8%. Then they had a manager who he dislocated his jaw trying to restrain John Roush during an argument with an umpire in which both the manager and Roush were ejected.
yeah, John Farrell
He was
left us
there.
for his dream job.
Yep. He was there 2011 and 2012. Then he took the job with the Red Sox.
Use
And
a
now
swear word.
their current manager is an International League Hall of Famer as the winningest manager in Durham Bulls history.
Yeah, Charlie. Yeah,
Yeah.
Charlie Montoyo. Yeah,
So he's been there since 2019. So
yeah.
are there any other comments you want to share about any of these managers?
Cito, Cito was the right guy for the World Series years. He didn't overmanage. Um, I claimed he was a statue a lot of the time, but I mean, he wouldn't wow you. He didn't bunt. He didn't hit and run. I had a coach on the Blue Jays team tell us they didn't even have a sign for the hit and run. He would leave pitchers in my world too long. But for the World Series years, he was great. And then when the team got older, well, he kept Joe Carter in the lineup well after he was no longer a useful player, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the right manager for that moment. When he came back, he was a little better at letting the younger players into the lineup. I mean, we had in his first run, we had Sean Green, who he wouldn't let play because he wanted Joe Carter to play. We had Carlos Delgado, who didn't get a lot of playing time. We had a lot of young, good players who just couldn't get in the lineup. Yeah, Charlie Montoyo seems to be the nicest guy in the world. Whether that will make a good manager or not is yet to be seen. It does seem that he's been mandated things by ownership or by his general manager. Guys come out of the game, starting pitchers come out of the game early. Last year, it was 2 times through the order for just about every starter. And he used up the bullpen quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to have been it seemed to be the strategy they wanted to use. And we got to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it seems like, if the GMs have assembled, certain players to perform certain tasks on the field, they're going to want the manager to employ those players in that certain particular way.
Yeah. And Charlie gets a lot of flack for following the strategy. In one of the playoff games against the Rays, Shoemaker was the starter, and he was going well, and he got pulled early, and we lost.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it would, maybe we would have lost anyway, but normally in a playoff game, you ride the hot pitcher longer.
Well, the team that they lost to there, I guess they can sympathize with you there about pulling a starter a little early.
Yeah. So, it was the strategy. To me, sometimes you adjust the strategy on the go, but
Yep.
they don't, Charlie knows who pays his salary.
Yeah, so that's those are the managers and some of the other personnel for the Blue Jays, and then we will look at the roster coming right up. Tom, this Blue Jays roster I've assembled, we'll look at it coming right here. And first, let me just remind all the listeners the rules for constructing this roster. It's a 25-year time period, and this was from 1995 to 2019. You pick one player per year. You get that version of the player. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. And so we will start off at catcher. I've got Russell Martin starting from 2015. He was worth just over 3 wins that year, had 23 bombs, above average with the stick. He was an all-star that year. Carlos Delgado at first base, 7.3 wins is how much he was worth. Led the league with 57 doubles. Also had 41 bombs, drove in 137. He OPS over 1,100, OPS plus of 181. He led the league in total bases with 378 and hit by pitches with 15. Aaron Hill at second base, worth just under 6 wins, led the league in at-bats and plate appearances. He hit 36 home runs as the second baseman that year for the Jays. He was an all-star and a Silver Slugger, solid with the glove as well. Josh Donaldson from 2016 at third base, worth 7.2 wins, 37 home runs, 32 doubles, drove in 99. He walked over 100 times, got on base at a 404 clip, OPS 953. He was an all-star, Silver Slugger. And at shortstop, Chris Woodward from 02, not the most dominant year. He was just worth 2.3 wins. He played mostly shortstop, but also played some other infield positions as well. He was worth 1 win with the glove, so solid defensively. So Tom, any comments on any of these players?
Well, Russell Martin's a good Canadian boy. he was loved. At the end of spring training, the first year he was with the team, they played 2 games in Montreal where Russell grew up, and it was a love-in. His father played the national anthem on the saxophone for one of the games. It was great to see. Carlos Delgado was amazing. He, he just, all he did was hit. Every day he hit. He never changed. I mean, that was a great season, but he had several great seasons. Aaron Hill was up and down. He had a wonderful season that year, and had other years where he was terrible. Poor guy. Chris Woodward, I don't remember that well. I mean, he was not a great player. I don't remember much about him. I know the team really liked him when he was coming up. We traded away players to open up shortstop for him, and he didn't succeed.
All right. And in the outfield, I've got switch hitting Melky Cabrera from 2014. He was worth 3.5 wins, 16 home runs, 35 doubles, hit 301, 351, 458. In center field, Vernon Wells from '03, worth 4.5 wins, led the league with 215 hits and 49 doubles. Also, 373 total bases led the league. He drove in 117. He had 317 that year. And in right field, Joey Bats, Jose Bautista from 2011. A huge year from him. He was worth 8.3 wins, led the league, 43 home runs, and 132 walks. Also led the league in slugging, OPS plus at 608, 1,056, and 182 respectively. Also was intentionally walked 24 times, which led the league. He drove in over 100. And at DH, Edwin Encarnacion from 2012, worth 5 wins, hit 42 bombs, drove in 110, OPS 941 with a 153 OPS plus. So some nice pop with a couple of these guys here in the outfield and at DH.
Yeah, Jose was amazing. He was the most intense player that I've ever seen. I mean, Josh Donaldson came close, but Jose gave us more to write about than anybody. I mean, always interesting, always interesting. Vernon Wells, again, he was kind of up and down in his career, but he was a star a lot of years. But he was one of like 3 or 4 guys that I've seen that always ran hard all the time, every play, ran out every ground ball, suffered from, leg issues a lot, probably because he ran out everything, he had hamstring issues and all that, but he always went hard. Melky as an outfielder, I used to say his range consisted of how far his arm could extend. But, he was good with the bat. And Edwin, the best story about Edwin is he a couple of times hit 3 home runs in a game. In hockey, our game, we throw hats on the ice. If somebody gets 3 goals, people threw hats on the field, and he didn't know why. But there's pictures of him holding big garbage bags of caps. So.
That's a great story. On the bench here, I've got the O-Dog, Orlando Hudson from '04. He's worth 5.2 wins. Hit 270, 341, 438. So not a lot of pop, but he was solid defensively there with 2.9 wins with the glove. And also have Alex Gonzalez from '01. He was worth 2 wins there as a shortstop for the Jays. Not great offensively, but he was also very solid with the glove. Sean Green in the outfield from '99, worth 6.4 wins. He had 45 doubles, which led the league. Also hit 42 home runs, drove in 123. He also led the league in total bases with 361. He was an all-star, Gold Glover, and a Silver Slugger. And the backup catcher, Greg Zahn from '05, he was worth 3.6 wins. He hit slightly below average with the stick. He had 11 home runs, 18 doubles, but he was solid defensively. So any comments on any of these guys on the bench?
Zahn also was a pre-game commentator for us until he got Me Too'd a fair bit, and suddenly he disappeared. As a player, he was great. As a commentator, he was old school, which is fine, but he was very old school. Sean Green I'd put in left field over Melky Cabrera, but then there's 2 or 3 that I'd put in over Melky Cabrera. We had Shannon Stewart, who was an excellent player who played left, and was terrific in 2000. Orlando Hudson, like you said, was a terrific glove man. I think he won the Gold Glove more than once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've had two Alex Gonzalez's playing third base or shortstop, and I always have to remind myself which one it is. And this one is the one we called Seabass. I don't know why we called him Seabass, but that was what we called him. He had like a really good half season with.
Mm-hmm.
Have I got the wrong one? No, this is not the Seabass. This is the earlier one.
Yeah, this is the previous one.
It's the earlier one. I've got it backwards. Yeah. Alex, he was a great defensive player and a very good-looking young man too. He enjoyed the female fans enjoyed him more than I did, I'm sure. He really had a good glove. We had some other shortstops that I liked probably more, but it's plus or minus. We had Tulowitzki, who had one really good year with the team. Other than that, he was injured a lot with us. And we had Yunel Escobar,
Mm-hmm.
who had a really good season with the team. Unfortunately, got traded in a big hurry because he wrote something on his eye black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
That ended up getting him banished to Florida or someplace. Yeah, Florida. um, there are things you don't do.
All right. And then moving along to the pitching staff in 96, starting pitcher, I've got Juan Guzman. He was worth 6.7 wins, led the league with a 2.93 ERA, a 171 ERA plus, a whip of 1.124. 7.6 hits per nine and 3.11 strikeout to walk ratio. So a lot of categories. He led the league in that year. He also went 11-8, 4 complete games. Roger Clemens in 97, huge year, worth 12.1 wins. Led the league in several categories. Wins with 21, ERA 2.05, 9 complete games, 3 shutouts, 264 innings, 292 strikeouts, ERA plus of 222, FIP of 225, a whip of 1.03. He was a Cy Young winner, not surprisingly, and an all-star that year. Roy Halladay, I got him in 08. He was worth 6.2 wins. He went 20-11 with a 2.78 ERA, led the league in complete games with 9, shutouts with 2, innings pitched with 246, batters faced 987, whip at 1.053, and strikeout to walk ratio 5.28. He was an all-star that year. Marcus Stroman in 2017, he went 13-9. He was worth 5.4 wins, ERA a little bit over 3 in 200 innings there. He was a Gold Glover. And rounding out the rotation, Al Leiter, lefty from 95. He was worth 5.7 wins. He went 11-11, 3.64 ERA, a lot of walks. Led the league with walks with 108 and wild pitches with 14. But when he got it in the zone, he was effective. So what are your thoughts on these starting pitchers here?
Oh, Juan Guzman was a favorite of mine. He was wild. He hit a lot of batters. He threw hard. People didn't want to dig in against him. It all worked in his favor. He was terrific. He had a little Jerry curl in his hair. He was one of my favorite players. Roger Clemens, on the other hand, is not one of my favorite players. You probably remember he played for Boston before. His
Mm-hmm.
career was going downhill, downhill, downhill with Boston. They didn't want to pay, not downhill. He just wasn't as good as he had been. Boston didn't want to pay him what he wanted. He signed with the Jays. He suddenly got younger, better, stronger.
Yeah, I
There was
wonder
a
how
lot
that
of
happened.
stories. Yeah, a lot of stories about how great his workout regime was. He also met somebody who in Toronto that later we found out doled out steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Roy Halladay, of course, another one of my favorites. Nothing has made me sadder than when he died.
Yeah, very
um,
tragic.
it was, yeah, he was terrific. He was great teammate, great. He was very intense, like Jose. He was really intense. Nobody talked to him on game day if he was pitching. Stroman's another one of my favorites. He'd always, he gave us lots to write about. He's very brash. He enjoyed winning. He enjoyed doing well. He, like you said, he was a great defensive player. He played shortstop. You know, before he became a pitcher, he was just a ton of fun. He would pause in the middle at the windup and did anything to put guys off.
Mm-hmm.
Al Leiter, his time with the Jays wasn't great. He had blister problems. He went several years with the blister problems, making like 2 or 3 starts a year. And then he had that one good year, and then he signed with the Marlins.
All right, and then in the bullpen, I've got Paul Quantrill from '98. Out of the pen, he went 3-4 with a ERA right about 2.6, 80 innings there for Quantrill. BJ Ryan, a lefty from '06, big year, 3.6 wins. He went 2-2 with a 1.37 ERA, saved 38 games, struck out 10.7 batters per nine. Casey Janssen in 2013, he went 4-1 out of the pen with an ERA around 2.5. He had 34 saves for the Jays. Tyler Clippard in 2018, he had 73 appearances, struck out 11.1 batters per nine. Ken Giles from 2019, he was worth 2.5 wins. He went 2-3, 187 ERA, 23 saves. He had 83 strikeouts and 53 innings, good for 14.1 strikeouts per nine. He almost struck out 5 batters per walk. Jeremy Accardo from '07, 4-4 out of the pen, 2.14 ERA, 30 saves in 64 games, 48 games finished there for Accardo in '07. And we'll finish up with a lefty, Scott Downs from 2010. He was worth 1.8 wins. He had a ERA at 2.64, 5-5 and 61 in the third innings there for the Jays. Any thoughts on any of these relievers?
Oh yeah, it's a really good group. Quantrill, BJ Ryan was a big free agent signing, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He really didn't have much more than the one good year with us. His arm kind of fell off, and and it's hard to throw without an arm. Casey Janssen was one of my favorite players to watch. He was the old-time drop and drag pitcher. He was great. He gave our website an interview in the early days of our site. He was super. Yeah, I'm not going to complain about any of those guys. Scott Downs, Cito used him like anytime we were ahead. He pitched a ton of games for us, and was really consistent. Yeah, and Ken Giles, of course. Yeah, I don't think he didn't have a blown save that whole time. He unfortunately had Tommy John surgery this last year and won't pitch this year. I think the Mariners signed him, right? And he he was just great.
Yeah, so there's the roster that I've assembled for the Toronto Blue Jays. Tom, I know you were, expressing some criticism with this roster, understandably so, at certain positions. So, every week we look at the some of the faults and criticisms of the roster. So, do you see any? Are you surprised at any of these names to show up on here? And were there any other guys who you thought could have been on here? I know you mentioned some earlier, Tulowitzki, Shannon Stewart, Escobar, Escobar, if you want to elaborate on any of those guys, or maybe add any other names who you thought deserve mentioned as maybe being worthy of being on a roster constructed like this.
Left field. Melky wasn't my favorite, not for any reason other than I didn't like him much in the outfield. He would have been better as a DH. We had a really good platoon with Reed Johnson and Frank Catalanano for a few years there. Reed Johnson had a really good year in 2006. He hit .319, he got on base. 390 on base average and just under 500 slugging. He was a good runner, not a real big base stealer, but a really good defensive outfielder. He could play any of the three spots, but he played left that year. And Shannon Stewart really was a terrific outfielder. He would have been a center fielder, but they didn't like his arm very much. He didn't throw very well, but he was an excellent fielding left fielder. And in 2000, he hit like .319 and had a slugging over 500. And he was like a 5-4 guy. I really liked Shannon Stewart a lot. Shortstop. 2-0, that was a huge trade for us. It didn't turn out to be, he was older. The team, another guy you could have considered was Jose Reyes. He had a good year for us. And then the year of the 2-0 trade, he made a couple of errors at bad moments. Like he cost us a couple of games. And our radio voice, Jerry Howarth, kind of ran him out of town. He didn't like him. Reyes was a happy guy. He didn't let losses affect his mood. I like guys like that. Howarth didn't, and we ended up trading Reyes for Tulowitzki. 2-0 was a professional. Unfortunately, he was a little older and he got hurt a few times with us. The bad one was wrecking his ankle, crossing first base on a close play. That kind of ruined his career. If it wasn't for that, he might still be playing. I think we're still paying him, or we were still paying him a year or so ago. Also, could have been, Escobar had a really good year the one year. I'm not a big Al Leiter fan just because we held on to him through all the injury years, and then when he finally got good, he ran away. Aaron Sanchez had a really good, I think it was 2015, led the AL in ERA, was just a terrific pitcher. Another guy who couldn't stay healthy. If he could have stayed healthy, he would have been he'd be one of our top pitchers still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Beyond
it's. Oh, go ahead.
beyond that, it's a good group. I like them.
Yeah, it's always a fun experiment putting these teams together, and it's tough to get everyone you want to get onto the roster. I know that, yeah, shortstop is definitely, I definitely struggled finding some adequate shortstops. Tulo had that. I know he was great in Colorado. Then when they acquired him, he was in the twilight of his career, battling injuries and whatnot. I think his looks like 2016 was Tulo's most productive year with the Jays. I had Donaldson had a big year that year, so I went with him in 2016. Escobar probably could have taken Escobar's 2011. Joey Batso had a huge year that year, so then I would have had to take different year from him, and then the other dominoes would have fallen, so it would have been. So I basically just kind of was like, all right, well, maybe I'll just kind of have a weaker shortstop. Maybe I was thinking Chris Woodward. Well, he's a manager now. He's got a lot of coaching experience. Maybe he can be kind of like a coach out there on the field and play some solid defense. And hopefully you get enough offense from everyone else.
And you picked him from like 2002, right? And
yeah,
we really didn't have a good team that year. So
yeah. Yeah.
Really didn't have a good team that year.
So yeah, that was and the other one that I kind of, I took Juan Guzman over Pat Henkin in 96. And Henkin, he was worth more wins. He had a higher WAR, but that was due to, having a lot more innings, which, although that's also valuable, he had a ton of innings that year. But I went with Guzman, who had fewer innings, but was more effective in those fewer innings. Like Guzman only had 27 starts that year, 187 and 2/3 innings. Henkin had he had over, let's see, that was 96, so he had 265 innings. He led the league there, so led the league in complete games and shutouts. So
he won the Cy Young that year too. So
yeah, he did. So it was kind of, I kind of shocked myself to forego that Cy Young year for Guzman, but I just I liked the effectiveness that Guzman had in his lesser innings, in his fewer innings. But you can make the argument for sure that Henkin should have been on the roster. It's tough because they both happened in the same year, so you can only get one of those guys. But that's so there's definitely some deserved criticism to the roster. Those are my defenses though. And listeners, if you want to add your critiques to the roster, go ahead.
Henkin was one of those guys that Cito rode too. I mean, he threw 260 innings 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And then his career kind of cratered. Not, I mean, he never threw 200 innings again. And his arm was being held on by chicken wire after that.
Yeah. So that was, he paid the price after those two monster years in a row.
I'm kind of I've talked to Pat Henkin. He's one of the nicest people on the planet. So, I kind of have really good feelings about him. But Guzman had an arm that couldn't be, you couldn't be beat. And Guzman, they moved him back and forth from the bullpen to the rotation, and he could have been a great reliever too. So.
Yeah, so there's the critiques and my defenses to them. Listeners, if you want to critique, go ahead, throw your feelings out there on social media. And if if you're motivated to create a roster better than mine, if you think you can do so, or if you just want to do it for fun, there's a link on the website boxseatbanner.com to download a template off of Google Spreadsheets. You can do so, or you can just make your own spreadsheet, make your own format. But if you do, I would love to see any rosters out there that you guys create, whether it's the Blue Jays or any other team. Every week, I open it up for listener questions on social media. So make sure to follow there, submit those questions if you have any. I've got a couple questions from Chris Kirk this week, and it's not surprising because I know that I've actually discussed a little bit of this stuff with him several times. So back in, I believe it was the 2015 divisional series there, the Jays against the Rangers. It went 5 games, and game 5 was a pretty interesting game to watch. So Tom, how intense was that inning there? And I think it was the 7th inning of game 5 there, and kind of even the bottom of the 6th into the top of the 7th and bottom of the 7th. I mean, how intense and much of a roller coaster ride was that stretch of baseball?
It was nuts. I mean, it was the weirdest full inning of baseball I've ever watched, I'm sure. Weird tie game, and a runner on third base, and Russell Martin throwing the ball back to the pitcher hits Sin Chu's bat.
Sin-Sun Chu, yeah.
The umpire at the plate immediately calls, dead ball. The runner from third runs in, and it went nuts. I mean, and the umpires overturned the dead ball call because it was an error. I mean, the umpire made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling for him, I have never seen that happen before. So, so I can understand him calling. I mean, I umpired Little League games, and I made mistakes because there was moments that I hadn't seen before. And this was it was weird. And, but the whole stadium saw him call the play over, and then gave them the run, which would have been the winning run. And they went nuts. They threw beer. Honestly, any ballpark in the league, if that had happened, the fans would have gone nuts.
Oh, no doubt.
And you couldn't explain to each fan one at a time, slowly and carefully, well, the umpire made a mistake and he can't, and all that stuff. So I'm sure it was like a 45-minute delay while they got the crowd settled down and the players settled down. Let's face it. I mean, the players went nuts too. And then the next inning, the Rangers forgot how to play ball. They made two official errors and one other error. It may have been 3 errors.
It looks like 3 errors in a row. Yeah.
And it amazed me because I thought the Jays would be, off their game because of how things went. But it was the Rangers that went off their game because of how things went. And then Jose hits that home run. And it was like a release of all the emotions that happened. He tossed the bat. It was brilliant. You couldn't have had a better reaction to, hitting a game-winning home run. The crowd went nuts. The players went nuts. Some Rangers went nuts. It was all, it was a big deal. It was a hard to believe inning. Like, I mean, if you saw it in a movie, you wouldn't have believed it.
So what are the Jays fans' feelings of the bat flip? Because I know bat flips nowadays, now MLB promotes them and they are celebrated, but back then players were still kind of vilified for the bat flips. Did everyone in Toronto just love Joey Bats' bat flip right there?
Oh yeah, I have a painting somewhere, not here, in a different room, I guess, of the bat flip. Of course we loved it. I mean, the inning had gone so badly beforehand, and there was so much emotion going on that, of course, he enjoyed the moment. And I can't see really any complaints about it, but you know, I'm on this side.
And the other side, the Rangers may have taken exception to it. I think was it the following year that Bautista and Odor kind of got into it there at second base. I don't know if it was also due to a hard slide and Odor kind of took out his frustration on Bautista's face there.
Yeah, I don't know. It was the last time that Bautista was going to bat against the Rangers that year. It was the last inning they were going to play. And of course, they plunked Jose. And Jose was not happy, to say the least. And his slide, yeah, it wasn't a good slide. But I mean, in my world, grow up. You lost that game before. Throwing at somebody is wrong, but anyway, and it went badly from there.
Yeah, I mean, Odor got a good punch in on Bautista, but to his credit, he stayed on his feet there. I think he got his sunglasses knocked off, but he stayed upright. And then so I know that Chris Kirk had a lot of feelings and questions on that. I think you answered them well. I had a couple questions. One is, when is Dave Stieb going to be elected into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, it should have been years ago. He was the best AL pitcher of the 90s. He was just, or of the 80s, sorry, of the 80s. He was just amazing. He pitched on some bad teams. His record, isn't what it should have been, but he had the best slider. I often talk about Bautista being the most intense player I've ever watched, but Dave Stieb was close. Dave Stieb wanted to win every game. Dave Stieb wanted to strike out every batter. He, if one of his teammates made an error, he would stare at them for a minute. He, I've been told by players knew him that if you played darts with him after a game, he wanted to win. He wanted to win everything. And he was just an amazing pitcher. He should be in the Hall.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he gets enough discussion and credit that he deserves.
Yeah, between him and Roy Halladay, they're equal. I mean, to me, they're the best two pitchers we've ever had. And saying one's better than the other it's a flip of the coin.
Okay, and the last question that I've got is, since the Jays are the only team left in Toronto, are they, obviously they're, Canada's team, but does all of Canada root for the Jays, or do certain Canadians maybe root for teams that are closer, like, maybe in Vancouver, do they root for the Mariners, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's probably people in the East that are close to Boston that are still Red Sox fans, people in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia that, probably identify with Boston, that are still Boston fans. And yeah, there's probably people in Vancouver that are Mariners fans. Although if you ever want to have a good time, go to a Mariners game in Seattle when the Blue Jays are there, because there will be 25,000 Blue Jays fans and 5,000 very pissed off Mariners fans. It's great fun to go to the games there. And I mean, there's always going to be the odd Yankee fan. You can fumigate, but you won't get them all. They're like cockroaches. And the Minnesota Twins are not far from the border.
Mhm.
If you're, in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. I went to games in Minnesota and met some Canadians who were Twins fans. So yeah, but most of us are. I mean,
What about in
they,
Montreal?
yeah,
Do they adopt the Jays now since the Expos left? Are they bitter against the Jays? How does that work?
I'm bitter against MLB. No, yeah, I think a lot of people in Toronto are Jays, are in Montreal, are Jays fans. There's a great history of baseball in Montreal. I mean, Jackie Robinson played there.
Mm-hmm.
The MLB worked very hard to kill off the Expos, and they did it. I would like to see a team back in Montreal. I think it will happen at some point, but probably not for a little while now after all the craziness of this past year. But I think most of the country, and I think probably most baseball fans in Montreal are Blue Jays fans. I know there's not many national fans in Montreal.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So yeah, those are the questions that we had this week for the Jays. Tom, we have gone over the roster extensively. And, we've talked about some of the guys who missed the cut, some other kind of changes that could have been made. But now we will grade this roster, the one that I have. And it is, again, we are grading it how it may do against other rosters that are similarly constructed, not necessarily how well I did in constructing it. So Tom, what do you think some of the strengths and weaknesses are? And I know that, I have some more information on all my other rosters. You can kind of hypothesize on that. What do you think the strengths and weaknesses are, and what letter grade would you assign it?
Obviously, there's a ton of power. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Batista, Encarnacion, Delgado, uh, uh, Donaldson. That's a pretty good middle of the lineup. There'd be few teams that would be much better than that. So yeah, offensively they'd be as good as most teams. I'm sure there's a couple that are probably better. And the starting pitching is probably up there with a lot of teams too, especially if you can throw out Roger Clemens every fifth or day. So,
Mm-hmm.
so they'd probably be in a race with most of the better teams, I would think. I guess the Yankees would have a pretty good team, eh?
Yeah. So what letter grade do you think you'd assign it?
Oh, probably a B.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, offensively, you mentioned a lot of big names there. A very strong heart of the lineup. They're across the board. If you look at WAR offensively, they're a little below average. I'm sure the weaker shortstops play into that a bit. And if you look at the categories that I've got, they are either slightly above or slightly below average across the board. Their runs, home runs, and RBIs are their best categories. So yeah, they got some solid power there. Defensively, a little below average. The starting rotation is the strength of the team, of course, led by that monster year from Clemens. That surely helps. And then
And a Cy Young Award winner, and Roy Halladay.
Yeah, Halladay, great year. Guzman, great year. So yeah, some and a lot of complete games. These guys are able to give you length, give you a lot of innings. So very strong rotation. Bullpen is decent. A couple very good years. BJ Ryan had a great year. Giles had a great year. So not ton of like dominant, great bullpen arms, but decent bullpen. And I think the starting pitching can, carry this team a little bit. And so I'm giving them a B minus. I think if I compare their WAR to everyone, which, is it's not the be all end all of stats, but it is kind of helps give you a basis on comparing teams and comparing players. They are kind of in the middle of the pack, but I think with the starting rotation as they are, I think that boosts them up a little bit. So yeah, I'm giving them B minus. So we're pretty right there, pretty close with our grades on this roster. And listeners, if you want to chime in with your grade, you can do so. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you would grade it.
You got both ways. You're going to have a lot of three true outcome guys. Lots of walks, lots of home runs, lots of strikeouts. both on the offense and defense side.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how it would work out in to hypothesize about that. So fun to think about.
It probably really doesn't matter that Melky Cabrera can't cover any ground in left field, because anything hit to left field is going to go out of the park anyway. So,
Tom, I've had a lot of fun talking about the Blue Jays with you here, talking about this roster, some of the history, a lot of the players, and some of the other personnel. But it is time to wrap up. So what are your final thoughts on the Toronto Blue Jays?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I like looking back at the old players. I used to play this game, Diamond Mine Baseball, on the computer, and I used to do the same thing. Pick a roster for a period of years for all the teams and just play them. And it was a ton of fun. And this is great fun, just you get to be reminded of some of the great players the team has had, some of the managers the team has had, some of the fun guys. The last 10 years of baseball in Toronto would not have been as near as fun if we didn't get Jose Bautista. If we didn't make that trade for Josh Donaldson. Those are two trades that made the team. I remember the year that we traded for Josh Donaldson. MLB.com, somebody had a listing of top GMs, a listing order of GMs in the major leagues, and they had Billy Beane at the top and Alex Andropoulos at the bottom. And I was sitting there saying, but Billy Beane traded an MVP for a handful of magic beans. So yeah, it's great to look back at the old teams. Hopefully, the next 20 years there'll be 20 different guys that'll make a great team too.
Yeah, it's going back, looking back, they won those back-to-back titles in 92 and 93. But yeah, they've kind of had minimal success since then.
Yep.
They are a major market team, and they should be able to compete in the AL East. Like you mentioned, they've got huge financial backing with the Rogers owning the team. So, money should not be an issue at all. And, they are in a position to compete now. You mentioned earlier, they signed George Springer this offseason. They signed Hyun-Jin Ryu last offseason. And they've got some nice young talent there. They've got, Biggio, Bichette, Guerrero Jr. So, with some nice bloodlines there, but some nice talent. And, the window is open for them right now to compete. They've got this, assembled a team, a roster out there, and they should be a fun team to watch in the immediate future. So
there's an amazing core right now. I mean, the infield should be terrific this year. Adding Marcus Semien really is going to help too. And the outfield, we had a terrific year from Teoscar Hernandez last year, and Lourdes Gurriel put Springer in the middle of them, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah,
they should use like 3 starting pitchers, but who couldn't?
So we may not be able to watch them in the spring, but once they are on TV there when the regular season begins, they are worthy of being watched, and I see them putting up a fight this year in the AL East. I guess this year in 2021, we're back to the normal postseason format with the 3 division winners and the 2 wild cards. So those postseason spots will be a little tougher to come by than they were in 2020. But I think the Jays will be fighting for those postseason spots. And yeah, they got that great core, and it should be fun for this window to compete right now. So again, Tom, thank you for joining me, and listeners, check Tom out at bluebirdbanter.com for all of your Jays, to get all your Jays information. You can follow him on Twitter at bluebirdbanter. Tom, thanks again for joining me here today.
Oh, you're welcome. It was fun.
This is Billy Ballas of Boxy Banter signing off.